Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I'm here today to talk about the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction for 2024, which announced its shortlist this week, bumping up against the International Booker. So on the day that they announced the shortlists, I did a reaction to the International Booker Prize. That reaction will be in the description box down below. And now I am here to catch up on the Carol Shields Prize. I am very excited that people were into the idea of talking more about the Carol Shields Prize this year, because last year it felt like people weren't into it. I think last year, which was the first year of the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction, people kind of wanted to wait and see how it went. And this year, now that we've been through it once before, it seems like people are into it, even though this year is really busy with book prizes so far. It's just stacked. Like I said, we had the International Booker announce a shortlist. This same week, we have the Women's Prize adding nonfiction. The Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist will be coming soon. It's a lot. So I'm really glad that people were so excited to talk about this prize because I find it to be very interesting. And I think the Longlist, Shortlist, and winner that they had last year, it was very interesting and sort of different from the type of books you usually see on Longlist and Shortlist. And I find that a little bit refreshing. So hopefully you do as well. If you're unfamiliar, this is the mission statement for the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction on their website, which will be linked down below. The Carol Shields Prize for Fiction is a major English language literary award celebrating creativity and excellence in fiction by women and non-binary writers in the United States and Canada. If you are unfamiliar with Carol Shields, who is the namesake of the prize, she was an American and Canadian author. That's sort of why it's settled on those two countries specifically. Carol Shields won a Pulitzer Prize for The Stone Diaries, which is this book. I believe this is a Canadian hardcover edition, which is kind of fun. So what's interesting about that is she is sort of my prime example for times when the Pulitzer jury and board decided to ignore the part about an American author for the Pulitzer Prize, because she was born in the United States but had immigrated to Canada by the time she published The Stone Diaries. And her citizenship had become so murky at that point that she did win a Pulitzer Prize, which is supposed to be for an American author. But on the strength of being in Canada, she was shortlisted for the Booker Prize at a time when Americans were supposed to be ineligible for the Booker Prize. So The Stone Diaries is actually the closest we have come to having an author win a Pulitzer Prize and a Booker Prize for the same book, because she won a Pulitzer for this, obviously, and it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. She was also a finalist for a book called Unless, I believe. I really am looking forward to rereading The Stone Diaries. I read it when I was about 20, and I think if I reread it now, I will have a lot more appreciation for it, because it's about a woman's life and how she can be sort of erased from her own biography. It sounds like a lot of stuff that I feel like I will understand a lot more today if I read it than I would have at the age of 20. So I'm looking forward to rereading this. But anyway, that's who Carol Shields is. If you want to know more about her, I would encourage you to do a Google search. I've heard a lot of great things about her other books. I have only read The Stone Diaries and Unless. And I think Unless is a bit of a flawed book. However, it builds to this really beautiful climax that has stayed with me to this day. So I recommend checking out more of her work. Anyway, let's do this thing and talk about the shortlist for the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction. Again, I'm really excited that people were more willing to talk about it this year. The downside of this is that I am going to be in Ireland when the winner of the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction 2024 is announced. So it's likely that this is the last you're going to hear from me about it. I'll probably recap in a Friday Reads when I get home, because the International Booker will be announced while I'm gone as well. So the International Booker is going to be announced on May 21st, and Carol Shields will be May 13th. I'm gone for both of them. So there's a chance I might do a reaction when I get home. More likely, I will just cover both of them in a Friday Reads. And we're not going to cover other book prize dates. I'll just remind you that May 6th, the Pulitzer Prize will be announced. And I have my prediction video down below, along with some other Longlist and Shortlist reactions. So let's do this. Let's dive in. And first, actually, let's talk about the books from the Longlist that did not make it, because if you know me, you know I love a long list for a tool of discovery. I love finding out about books that I didn't already know about. And the Carol Shields Prize is great for that. There were some familiar books on here, but there were a good mix of books that I did not know about. So I'm going to mention the long list, and I will have affiliate links to all of these books in the description box down below. Those will go to bookshop.org. If you use those, I get a small little kickback. It helps me out. Otherwise, check out your local independent bookstore and try to get one of these books from them. Supporting independent bookstores is always a good thing to do. Or you can, support your local library, which is what my t-shirt says you should do. And supporting your local library is another great way of supporting your community. So the long-listed titles that don't move on to the shortlist are Cocktail Stories by Lisa Alward, Dances by Nicole Cuffey, Between Two Moons by Aisha Abdel Gawad, Loot by Tanya James, You Were Watching from the Sand Stories by Juliana Lamy, The Future by Catherine Leroux, I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Mackay, a previous Pulitzer finalist for her last book, but we don't need to go into that here. A Council of Dolls by Mona Susan Power. I admit, I'm a little sad that one didn't make the shortlist because I read that back in November and I thought it was a great book. Then there's Chrysalis Stories by Anuja Verghese and Land of Milk and Honey by C. Pam Zhang. Now, let's talk about the shortlist. That's kind of what we're here to do. So again, I just wanted to mention the long list because I didn't do a reaction to the long list, and I think there are some really interesting books on here. And if you have thoughts about any of the titles from the long list that did not make it, please let me know in the comment section down below, because again, I think this is fascinating. So the shortlisted titles are Eleanor Catton's Burnham Wood, Claudia Day's Daughter, Kim Coleman Foot's Coleman Hill, Vivi Ganeshananthan's Brotherless Night, and Yannicka Oza's A History of Burning. Now, the Carol Shields Prize includes a jury citation on their website, and I think that's going to be a great thing to use to talk about all of these books rather than just read the plot description of it, although there will be plot descriptions either on Bookshop or if you follow the link to the Carol Shields Prize website. Let's start with Burnham Wood by Eleanor Catton. Here is what the jury's citation is for this one. Shakespearean in its ambition, with a large cast of characters, Burnham Wood manages to be both a nuanced psychological novel and a cultural satire of New Zealand's contemporary contradictions, tackling climate change, environmental activism. The book's title, from Macbeth, of course, is the name of a guerrilla gardening collective, and the fatal inequities of late capitalism. Eleanor Catton is a superlative prose stylist. Her sentences exhilarate and delight. Witty, often scathing, and painfully emotionally accurate, this brilliant novel surprises to the last. Now, I admit, I've heard some mixed things about Burnham Wood, and the mixed responses have made me stay away. Eleanor Catton won the Booker Prize for her novel The Luminaries, which has also kept me away, mostly because it's like a brick of a book, and it's supposed to be very dense and complicated, and I've also heard very mixed things about that. So Eleanor Catton seems to be a bit of a love her or hate her author, a cilantro author, if you will. And that has kept me away. Someday I would like to try one of her books. I don't know if I would go with The Luminaries or Burnham Wood, but there is a bit of interest on my part, I confess. And the more people talk about her, the more curious I feel to try one of her works so far, because of the cilantro qualities of Burnham Wood and The Luminaries. I do feel like I might wait for her next book, whatever that is, but given the length of time between Burnham Wood and The Luminaries, maybe that's a dangerous thing to do, because it could be a long time before we get another book from Eleanor Catton, or maybe she'll write something fast. I don't know. I should also mention my dog Teddy is asleep on the floor behind me, so you might hear dog snores. Sometimes that confuses people, so I should mention there is a dog snoring in the room. If you hear a dog snoring, it's him. You're not crazy. So that is what they said about Burnham Wood. Let's move on to Daughter by Claudia Day. This is one of the books that I had been unfamiliar with when I looked more closely at the Carol Shields Prize long list. And I admit, because I didn't do a reaction, I looked at it and then kept the tab open and meant to go back and look more closely at the titles, and I never did. So this shortlist reaction video is also a reminder to myself to learn more about these books, because I really wanted to do that in the first place. So this is actually going to be my first experience of what Daughter by Claudia Day is. Here is the jury's citation. Daughter is a literary stick of dynamite, incendiary and exposing painful truths about art, family, and systemic inequities. Claudia Day writes about the fraught relationship between a woman and her novelist father as she tries to build her own creative career in his shadow. Both a study of intimate manipulations and the trope of the male genius, Daughter is a novel that ricochets between uncomfortable emotions and social constructs with fearlessness and intent. That sounds fascinating. If you know me, you know I am pretty easily suckered in by books that are about complicated families, especially if there's a complicated parent dynamic in there, almost as if I had complicated parents. And I am always fascinated by those stories. I really gravitate toward them very strongly. So you can imagine Daughter by Claudia Day sounds really interesting to me, and I am going to be seeking out, here's the trouble. And if you follow along, you know this, but because I'm going to be gone for most of May, and then June is when I do Pride reading, the likelihood that I would be able to read any of these books before July is pretty slim. However, I am going to check to see if Daughter is on any of my subscription apps for the audio, or if my library has a copy. And if they don't, I might request that they get one, because, again, support your local library. It's a good thing to do. So, yeah, Daughter by Claudia Day immediately jumped out as something that I could potentially be curious about reading. Then we have Coleman Hill by Kim Coleman Foote. And right away, I'm noticing that Coleman is in the author's name and in the title of the book. So I'm wondering if this is going to be kind of, meta, if auto-fiction-y, something like that. Obviously, this is another one of the books that I was very unfamiliar with and have not caught up to since the Longlist was announced. So this is going to be my first experience of Coleman Hill as well. Here is the jury citation for this one. Coleman Hill reveals with extraordinary depth the journey of two families from the south to north and their interwoven stories of pain, loss, and triumph. Pushing the narrative boundaries of fiction and family memoir, Kim Coleman Foote writes in the tradition of biomythography, a word coined by the late American poet and essayist Audre Lorde. Yet Kim Coleman Foote also claims new literary territory for how to piece together the fragments of the past. Formally inventive and emotionally captivating, this brilliant accomplishment will take its place among the best of its generation. Well, I'm feeling proud of myself that I caught on that Coleman is the middle name of the author, and it is in the title. So that biomythography angle definitely is there. Yes, I am not going to immediately latch onto this one the way I did with Daughter, but I am going to seek out other reviews. Like maybe there's a good Kirkus review of this, and it does sound really interesting to me. So, I think Birnam Wood, in my estimation, is losing out in the realm of books that I would probably read. I would probably gravitate toward one of the other three that we have talked about so far, but I would still potentially be convinced to read Birnam Wood. So the Carol Shields Prize is doing pretty good so far. Hopefully that trend will continue with Brotherless Night by Vivi Ganeshananthan. Here is the jury's citation for this one. An ambitious and beautifully written novel, Brotherless Night explores how ordinary people can be swept up in political violence and, despite their best efforts, eventually be swallowed by it. Through her sensitively crafted characters, Vivi Ganeshananthan asks us to consider how history is told, whom it serves, and the many truths it leaves out. A magnificent book. From that description, I do kind of feel like this has the potential to ultimately win, but I don't think we can really make guesses like that yet when it comes to the Carol Shields Prize, because it feels like a very offbeat book prize, like a very different book winner profile from the Booker so far, or the Pulitzer, which is a good thing. But I think we can't quite tell what a Carol Shields Prize book is yet. But from the description, this seems like it could be. I have heard good things about Brotherless Night. I confess the thing that has made me stay away from this one is its size. I believe it is a big book, but I could easily be convinced to read this as well. So if you have thoughts about Brotherless Night, let me know in the comment section down below. And again, I feel like if you told me to read this long list, or shortlist rather, Birnam Wood would be the one that I'd be least excited to read so far, but we'll see if that trend continues. I don't know why I'm hating on Birnam Wood by ranking it against whether or not I would read it, but here we are. Let's talk about the next book on the list, which is A History of Burning by Janneke Oza. Here is the citation. Janneke Oza boldly navigates her remarkable symphonic debut through a century of displacement of 4 generations of an extended Indo-Ugandan family. A History of Burning transmutes these sweeping moments of history into a nuanced and layered tale of loss, rage, and transcendence, with its unflinching gaze and layered landscapes to ultimately create a heartbreaking and joyous portrait of a family that has kept each other alive with stories. Well, they've done it again. That sounds really interesting to me. This was actually another one that I had been very unfamiliar with when the long list was announced, and that I'm glad I'm finally catching up to it, because that sounds really interesting. So, Daughter in A History of Burning and Brotherless Night. Those are the 3 that I'm really most gravitating toward right away out of the final 5 books. I would love to hear what you think of this shortlist, but yeah, I think as a reader, I'm not trying to review these books, by the way. I'm just saying my reaction to these books is that I would most likely read A History of Burning, Daughter, or Brotherless Night. I could easily be convinced to read Coleman Hill, and it might take a little more work, but it's not outside the realm of possibility that I would read Birnam Wood by Eleanor Catton. So this is a really solid short list of books. The Carol Shields Prize for Fiction has done it again. I actually don't remember who was the winner last year. While I'm here on the website, I'm going to go look. Previous winners, there is only one. It was When We Were Sisters by Fatima Asghar last year. That is actually a book that I wanted to read, and I think I saved it, the audio, somewhere on an app, and obviously never got around to reading it. So really, the Carol Shields Prize is doing all right, because I definitely wanted to read the winner last year. I just haven't gotten around to it. And actually, I'm going to look at the shortlist. Yeah, the shortlist had The Sleeping Car Porter. I own a copy of that book. It's up here somewhere. And I would really like to read that. I wanted to read When We Were Sisters. And yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about elsewhere. So yeah, the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction is the real deal as far as I'm concerned. This is something that I'm really going to be following. So I'm so glad that people were interested in hearing more about the shortlist and that we can talk about this now. I'm just kind of bummed that I'm going to be away, like out of the country, when the winner is announced, because I think this is a great prize to follow. And I believe that that prize of $150,000 US is the largest of any major book prize. So that's pretty cool. It also comes with a residency with Fogo Island Inn. So that's cool. I don't know where Fogo Island is. Hopefully it's a lovely inn. I imagine it is, since it's part of this prize package. And then each runner-up receives $12,500 USD. And then all of the monetary awards are presented by a sponsor for the prize. So yeah, I think this is a cool prize. And I'm glad people wanted to hear more about it, because I'm a fan. And let this be a PSA. Check out Carol Shields. She is a great writer. So let me know what you think of the short list and the long list, and if you have recommendations for which of these books you think I might read first, because I find this to be a fascinating short list. It really caught my attention, and in a good way. So I could easily read these. Again, the danger is that I probably won't be able to get to any of them until July. It's just the way it is with everything that's going to be going on between now and then. So let me know which ones you think I should prioritize, which ones you will be prioritizing, if any, and all of that good stuff in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.